Genesis 26. Isaac and Abimelech. There was another famine in the land. This had happened before, when Abraham was alive. Now Isaac went to Gerar to visit Abimelech. Abimelech was the king of the Philistines. The Lord appeared to Isaac. He said, "Do not go to Egypt. Instead, live in the land that I will show to you. Stay in this land, and I will be with you. I will bless you. I will give these lands to you and your descendants. I made a strong promise to your father Abraham. I will make that promise become true. I will give you many descendants. They will be as many as the stars in the sky. And I will give these lands to them. Because of your descendants, I will bless everyone on the earth. This will happen because Abraham obeyed me. He obeyed all my laws and rules, and he did what I told him to do." God made this promise become true when he sent Jesus Christ into the world. Through Jesus, God has blessed everyone on the earth. So Isaac stayed in Gerar. The men of Gerar asked Isaac about his wife. He told them, "She is my sister." He was afraid to say, "She is my wife." He thought that the men of Gerar might kill him because Rebekah was very beautiful. See Genesis 12:11-14. Isaac stayed in Gerar for a long time. One day Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, looked down from his window. He saw that Isaac was kissing Rebekah. Abimelech called Isaac to come to him. He said, "Rebekah is your wife? Why did you say, 'She is my sister'?" Isaac replied, "I thought that someone might kill me because of her." Abimelech saw that Isaac and Rebekah were married. Abimelech said, "You have done a bad thing against us. One of my men might have had sex with your wife. Then we would have been guilty of a bad sin." So Abimelech told his people, "I will kill anyone who hurts this man, or his wife." Isaac planted crops in the land and they grew very well. They made times the amount of food that he had planted. This was because the Lord blessed him. The Lord kept his promise. He blessed Isaac because he did not go to Egypt. He blessed him, even when Isaac did not tell the truth to the Philistines about Rebekah. Isaac became rich. His riches continued to grow so that he became a very important person. He had many sheep, goats, and cows. He also had many servants in his house. He had so many servants that the Philistines became jealous of him. So they took dirt from the ground and they filled up Isaac's wells. When Abraham was alive, his servants had dug these wells to get water. Abimelech said to Isaac, "You have become too powerful for us. Go and live somewhere else." So Isaac moved away from that place. He put his tents in the valley of Gerar and he stayed there. Isaac dug the dirt out of the wells that Abraham had dug. After Abraham died, the Philistines had filled them with dirt. Isaac gave these wells the same names as his father had given them. Isaac's servants went to dig in the valley. They found another well there. It was full of fresh water. But the shepherds of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's shepherds. They said, "The water belongs to us." So Isaac called that well Ezek, because they quarreled with him there. Ezek means quarrel. So Isaac's servants dug another well. But the shepherds of Gerar quarreled about that one too. Isaac called that well Sitnah. Sitnah means to go against someone. Isaac moved away from Sitnah and he dug another well. No one quarreled with him about this well. So he called it Rehoboth. He said, "Now the Lord has given us a place to live. We will have many good things in this land." Rehoboth means to have space or room. From that place, Isaac went to Beersheba. That night the Lord appeared to him. The Lord said, "I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, because I am with you. I will bless you. I will give you many descendants because of my servant Abraham." This is the promise that God gave to Abraham. Isaac built an altar there and he worshipped the Lord. He put up his tent there. His servants dug a well. During that time, Abimelech came from Gerar to visit Isaac. He came with Ahuzzath his officer and with Phicol the leader of his army. Abimelech is a name for the kings of the Philistines. Phicol is a family name. Isaac asked them, "Why have you come to me? You hated me and you sent me away from you." They replied, "We saw that the Lord is with you. So we said to one another, there should be a promise between us and you. So, let us make a promise with you. Promise that you will not hurt us. We did not hurt you. We did only good to you. And we sent you away as friends. Now the Lord is blessing you." Then Isaac made a large meal for them. And they all ate happily together. Early the next morning, they promised each other to be friends. Then Isaac said goodbye to them. They left as his friends. Eating a meal together showed that they all agreed to keep the promise. The same day, Isaac's servants came to him. They told him about a well that they had dug. They said, "We have found water." Isaac called the well Shiva. So the town is still called Beersheba. Shiva means promise or seven. Beersheba means either well of the promise or well of seven. When Esau was 40 years old, he got married. He married Judith. She was the daughter of Beer the Hittite. He also married Basemath. She was the daughter of Elon the Hittite. Esau's wives brought a lot of trouble to Isaac and Rebekah. Esau married women from the land that he lived in Canaan. He did not go back to his own relatives to find a wife. Every person needs to invite God into that person's own life. It is not enough if that person's parents were Christians. Each person needs his or her own experience of a relationship with God. It was the same for Isaac. His father, Abraham, was a real friend of God. And Abraham had learned to trust God completely. So, Isaac had always known about God. But Isaac still needed to know God for himself. And Isaac needed to learn many of the lessons that Abraham learned. But it seems that Isaac learned easily. He had a good character. He wanted to serve God. And Isaac tried not to argue with people. God was kind to Isaac. Notes on the verses. Verse 1: Abimelech may have been a title for the king, like Pharaoh. The Abimelech that Abraham knew may have died. The earlier Philistines may have been a different nation from the Philistines whom we read about elsewhere in the Bible. Verse 2: There was a famine. However, God clearly let Isaac know that he was looking after Isaac. But Isaac needed to obey God. Verses 3 to 5: God reminded Isaac about the promises that God gave to Abraham. God was now making these promises to Isaac and his descendants. Of course, Isaac had already heard about these promises from Abraham. But this experience was very important for Isaac. God was speaking to Isaac. So, Abraham's God was now Isaac's God too. Verse 6: Isaac had heard God's instructions. So, Isaac obeyed God. Perhaps Isaac was not sure how he could find enough food during the famine. But he decided to trust God. The same God who created the world would look after Isaac. Verse 7: People used the word sister to mean many different relatives. But we can see that Isaac was lying. He did not want anyone to know that Rebekah was his wife. So, he said something that would confuse other people. Abraham had done the same thing in Genesis 20:2. Both Isaac and Abraham were trying to protect themselves. Isaac had not learned from Abraham's experience. And Isaac was not yet ready to trust God to protect him. Verse 8: Isaac did not need to be afraid. God was protecting Isaac. Nobody took Rebekah away from Isaac. Verses 9 to 11: Isaac did not actually suffer because of his lies. But Abimelech had to warn Isaac. Perhaps Abimelech realized that Isaac was a holy man. Abimelech was worried that innocent people might suffer because of Isaac's lie. Perhaps Abimelech remembered the message that God gave him about Abraham, Genesis 20:6-7. So, Abimelech gave an order to his people. It seems that God was using Abimelech to protect Isaac and Rebekah. Verses 12 to 13: We can see that God was blessing Isaac. Even during the famine, Isaac's harvest was very plentiful. In fact, it was even more plentiful than you would expect in a good year. Verses 14 to 16. Abimelech had ordered the Philistines to keep Isaac safe. But they were jealous of his success. They tried to cause problems for him. And they tried to frighten him. Abraham and Abimelech had made an agreement about wells. Genesis 21:25-31. These wells now belonged to Isaac. But the Philistines spoiled the wells. And Abimelech told Isaac to leave their country. Abimelech's men did not carry out the covenant that people had made with Abraham. The covenant had showed that the wells belonged to Abraham. Water was precious and people often quarreled about it. Lot quarreled with Abraham and the Philistines quarreled with Isaac. Later, Laban quarreled with Jacob. Verses 17 to 18. But Isaac did not argue. He wanted to be at peace with the Philistines. So, he moved elsewhere. Verses 19 to 21. The arguments continued. Everyone wanted a good supply of water. But Isaac just moved to another place. It seems that he was trusting God to provide for him. Isaac had seen how God gave a plentiful harvest in a famine. So, Isaac was not afraid to move elsewhere. The name Isaac means quarrel. Sitnah means enemies. Verse 22. Rehoboth means space. Isaac thanked God. Isaac did not need to fight the people who opposed him. God had given Isaac a place to live. Verses 23 to 25. God spoke to Isaac again. By his God's words, God gave confidence to Isaac. Isaac did not need to be afraid. God was with Isaac. God would help Isaac. And God would do for Isaac everything that God promised to Abraham. Like his father Abraham, Isaac stayed in Beersheba. And there, Isaac prayed to God. Verses 26 to 29. Abimelech came to see Isaac. Abimelech wanted to make an agreement with Isaac. Isaac had become wealthy and powerful. So perhaps Abimelech was afraid that Isaac's men might oppose him. Abimelech's words in verse 29 were not quite true. Abimelech had told his people to protect Isaac. But then, Abimelech told Isaac to leave the country. Abimelech's people spoiled Isaac's wells. And they argued about other wells. But it seems that Isaac did not care about these matters. Isaac wanted peace with Abimelech's people. So, Isaac made the agreement with them. Verses 30 to 31. When people made covenants, they often had a meal together. They did that to show friendship. Verses 32 to 33. Isaac's servants finished digging another well that day. They were glad. They had left behind many wells. But God had provided another well for them. Verses 34 to 35. Esau was Isaac's first son. But Esau did not behave like Isaac. Isaac waited patiently while his father arranged a wife. But Esau chose his own wives. Isaac's wife belonged to a family that knew about God. But Esau's wives came from a country where people were wicked. Isaac hated arguments. But Esau chose wives who caused constant trouble for Isaac and Rebekah. Genesis 27. Isaac blesses Jacob. Isaac became old. He could not see anything because his eyes were weak. He called for his older son, Esau. Isaac said, "My son." Esau replied, "Yes, I am here." Isaac said, "I am an old man. I may die very soon. Get your bow and your arrows. Go out into the country and kill some wild animals for me. Then prepare the food that I like to eat. Bring it to me so that I can eat it. Then I will give you my blessing before I die." People use bows to shoot arrows. An arrow is like a stick with a sharp point at the end. In the Old Testament, a father gave his blessing to the oldest son. This son has the birthright. Isaac does not know that Esau sold his birthright. See Genesis 25, 31 to 34. Esau does not tell Isaac that he has sold his birthright. Rebekah listened to what Isaac said to Esau. She waited until Esau went out to the country to kill an animal and bring back the meat. Then she said to Jacob, I heard your father say this to Esau, bring me some meat and prepare the food that I like to eat. When I have eaten it, I will give you my blessing. I will bless you in front of the Lord before I die. Now my son, listen carefully and do as I tell you. Go out to the animals and bring 2 goats to me. They must be very good young goats. Then I will prepare some food that your father likes to eat. I will cook the meat in the way that he likes. Then take the food to your father. When he has eaten it, he will give you his blessing before he dies. Jacob said to his mother Rebekah, that will be difficult. Hair covers my brother's skin. But my skin does not have any hair. My father may touch me. Then he will know that I am deceiving him. He will not bless me. He will curse me instead. Jacob's mother said, my son, the curse will happen to me, not you. Do what I say. Go and get the things that I told you. Jacob went and he got the goats. He brought them to his mother. She prepared some food in the way that Isaac liked to eat. Then Rebekah took some of Esau's best clothes that were in her house. She put them on Jacob, her younger son. She covered Jacob's hands with the skin from the goats. She also covered the part of his neck that had no hair. Then she gave to Jacob the food that Isaac liked to eat. And she gave him some bread that she had made. Goats have hair on their skin. Rebekah did this to make Isaac think that Jacob was Esau. If Isaac touched Jacob, he would think that Jacob was Esau. He would think that because of the hair on the skin. Jacob went to his father. He said, my father. Isaac replied, yes, my son. Who are you, Esau or Jacob? Jacob said, I am Esau. I am your firstborn son. I have done as you told me. Please sit up. Eat some of the meat from the wild animal that I killed. Then you can bless me. Isaac asked his son, my son, how did you find it so quickly? Jacob replied, the Lord your God helped me find it. Jacob says the Lord your God. Jacob does not call God his own God. Isaac said to Jacob, come near to me so that I can touch you, my son. Then I will know if you really are my son Esau. Jacob went close to his father. Isaac touched him and he said, the voice is Jacob's voice. But the hands are Esau's hands. Isaac did not know that it was Jacob because he could feel the hair on Jacob's hands. They felt like Esau's hands. So Isaac blessed Jacob. Isaac asked again, are you really my son Esau? Jacob replied, I am. Isaac said, my son, bring me some of your meat. I will eat it. Then I will bless you. So Jacob brought the food to him and Isaac ate it. Jacob also brought some wine and Isaac drank it. Then Isaac said, come here my son and kiss me. So Jacob went to Isaac and kissed him. Isaac smelled the clothes that Jacob wore. Then Isaac blessed him. He said, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field. It is like a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you rain for your crops, so that they grow well in the good ground. Then you will have plenty of grain for food. And you will have grapes to make wine. Crops are plants. They can be any plants that people or animals eat. May the people of many nations serve you. May they respect you as their master. You will rule over your brothers. Yes, your mother's sons will bend down to respect you. May God curse anyone who curses you. And may he bless anyone who blesses you. This is what God told Rebekah. See Genesis 25:23. When Isaac had blessed Jacob, Jacob left him. Just then, Esau came back from the country where he had killed an animal. He prepared nice food that Isaac liked to eat. Then he took the food to his father, Isaac. Esau said, my father, please sit up. Eat some of the meat from the wild animal that I have killed. Then you can bless me. His father Isaac asked, who are you? Esau replied, I am your firstborn son, Esau. Isaac's body shook very much. He asked, who was it who killed an animal and brought the meat to me? Just before you came, I ate all of it. And then I blessed him. And God will certainly bless him." Isaac's body shook. He now knows what Jacob has done. He knows that he cannot remove his blessing from Jacob. The son that he loves cannot receive the blessing. Isaac knows that God will bless Jacob and not Esau. Esau heard what his father had said and he cried aloud. He was very upset. He said, "My father, please bless me too." But Isaac said, "Your brother came to me. He deceived me and he took your blessing away from you." Esau said, "Yes, Jacob is the right name for him. He has cheated me twice. First he took my birthright. Now he has taken my blessing as well." Then Esau asked his father, "You must still have some blessing left for me, don't you?" Jacob means he deceives. This is what deceives means. Jacob says things that are not true. And he does things that are not right. Isaac replied, "I have made Jacob master over you. All his relatives will become his servants. I have given him crops and wine. So what can I still do to bless you, my son?" Isaac is saying that there is no blessing left for Esau. Esau said, "My father, you surely have one blessing left for me. Please bless me too." Then Esau wept loudly. Isaac replied, "You will not live in a place where the ground gives good food. You will not have rain to make your crops grow. You will have to fight to get the things that you need. You will serve your brother as your master. But when you choose to turn against him, you will become free from his power over you." This is the only blessing that Isaac could give Esau. He could not take back the blessing that he gave to Jacob. Because Isaac had blessed Jacob, Esau hated his younger brother Jacob. Esau said quietly, "My father will die soon. When we have buried his body, I will kill my brother." Someone told Rebekah what her older son, Esau, had said. So she told her younger son, Jacob, to come to her. She said to him, "Your brother Esau wants to kill you, because of what you did to him. Now my son, do what I tell you. Quickly go away from here. Go to my brother Laban who lives in Haran. Live with him for a time. Stay there until your brother is not angry with you any longer. He may forget what you did to him. Then I will send a message to you, so that you can come back from Haran. I do not want to lose both of my sons in one day." Rebekah thinks that Esau and Jacob will kill each other. Or she thinks that, if Esau kills Jacob, other people will have to kill Esau. Then Rebekah said to Isaac, "I do not like living in the same place as Esau's wives. It makes me very upset, because they are Hittites. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women who live in this land, I will be very sad. I would rather die." Rebekah wants Isaac to send Jacob away to find a wife. He will send Jacob to go to his relatives. Rebekah wants that to happen so that Esau will not be able to kill Jacob. Jacob stayed in Haran for 20 years. Rebekah did not see Jacob again. Isaac became an old man. He thought that he might die soon. But in fact, he would live for many more years. Isaac wanted to give a special blessing to Esau, who was Isaac's first son. Esau was also Isaac's favorite son. The whole family realized that this blessing was an important matter. Isaac was a holy man. God would be present when Isaac gave his blessing. And Isaac's words would not just come from his own imagination. Isaac's words would be a prophecy that came from God's Holy Spirit. Rebekah wanted Jacob to receive the blessing instead of Esau. And Jacob himself was desperate for the blessing. Previously, he bought the birthright, the rights of the oldest son from Esau. Genesis 25:33. Jacob obtained Isaac's blessing by methods that were not honest. But the blessing that Jacob received really came from God. And it seems that Jacob received nothing from Isaac except the blessing. Esau received great wealth in Canaan. Genesis 36:6. But Jacob left Canaan with very few possessions. Genesis 28:20. Jacob left home quickly, because he had to escape from Esau. but the blessing was all that Jacob really needed. And, as Jacob escaped, he received an even better blessing. God himself spoke to Jacob. The God of Abraham and Isaac became Jacob's God. 2 Genesis 28:13-21. Notes on the verses. Verses 1-2 Isaac should have called both sons to him. He knew about the prophecy at his son's births. Genesis 25:23. In the prophecy, Jacob was the son that God had chosen. It is clear that Isaac spoke to Esau in secret. Verse 3 Isaac loved food and he wanted Esau to make a special meal for him. Esau was happy to do that, although he had given his birthright to Jacob. Esau was the oldest son and so normally he would have had the birthright. Verse 4 At special times, people often ate special meals. Isaac's request for a special meal emphasizes the importance of his blessing. Verse 5 Isaac spoke to Esau in secret, but Rebekah heard Isaac's words. Isaac and Rebekah may have lived in a tent. Rebekah was perhaps outside, but she heard clearly. She knew that Isaac loved Esau. Genesis 25:28. But God had told her that Jacob would be more important than Esau. Genesis 25:23. So, she made a plan so that Jacob would get Isaac's blessing. Verse 6 Rebekah knew about God's choice. She should have trusted God better. Then she would have known that God's plans never fail. Rebekah wanted to get something that was right. However, her actions were not right. She lied and she cheated. Verses 7-10 Rebekah was careful. She made a plan. She did not tell Jacob everything that he would have to do. He would have to lie. And he would have to cheat. But if he had known how much, he might have been afraid. Verse 11 The Hebrew text has I am a smooth man. The Hebrew word for smooth can also mean that the person is not sincere. Verse 12 Jacob realized that Isaac would not just be speaking from his own imagination. Isaac's words would come from God's Holy Spirit. So, it mattered whether Jacob received a blessing or a curse. Verse 13 Rebekah was encouraging Jacob. She told him not to worry about a curse. Of course, she had already heard the prophecy in Genesis 25:23. So she was confident about Jacob's future. Verse 15 Esau was probably married, but his best clothes were still with Rebekah. Verses 16-17 Rebekah and Jacob prepared everything carefully. They wanted Isaac to think that Jacob was really Esau. Verses 18-26 Jacob went to see his father, Isaac. But Jacob wanted Isaac to think that Jacob was really Esau. Isaac wanted to give his blessing to Esau, because Esau was Isaac's oldest son. But Jacob was desperate to receive Isaac's blessing. This was because Jacob wanted God's blessing. But Jacob did not really know God when these events happened. And Jacob did not realize how God wanted Jacob to behave. Jacob imagined that he had to earn the blessing by his own clever schemes. He had already persuaded Esau to sell the birthright to him. And here, Jacob received Isaac's blessing by another scheme. Jacob made Isaac give him the blessing. But we cannot really earn God's blessing by our own efforts. God's blessing is a free gift because of his kindness. We receive God's blessing if we humbly invite him into our lives. In chapter 28, Jacob would himself meet God. Then Jacob would understand these things better. Verses 27-28 Isaac's blessing came from God. God would make Jacob successful. God would do good things in Jacob's life. Verse 29 There were probably no other sons. But Isaac said this in case there would be other sons. Blessings for families probably had the same words in them every time. But Isaac added the special words that God spoke to Abraham in Genesis 12:3. Jacob would receive the benefit of God's promises to Abraham. Verse 30 Esau too wanted Isaac's blessing. Esau had not cared about the birthright, but he still wanted the blessing. Verse 31 Esau was able to prepare food. Rebekah did not stop him and neither did Jacob. Verses 32-33 Before, Isaac had thought that he was blessing Esau. But after that, the real Esau came in. Isaac could not deny that Jacob had received the blessing. Verses 34 to 36. Esau was sorry because he did not receive the blessing from Isaac. But Esau was not sorry about the wrong things that he did in his life. Esau did not care about God. Esau did not care about what God wanted. Esau wanted to kill his brother. Verse 41. Verses 37 to 40. Isaac hesitated to give any blessing to Esau. Isaac realized that God had told him what to say about Jacob. But then God gave Isaac a prophecy about Esau. Esau's descendants would live in a city that was later called Petra. This city was in the desert. And Esau's descendants would oppose Jacob's descendants. But Jacob's descendants would be more powerful. They would make Esau's descendants into slaves. You can read how this happened in 2 Samuel 8, 11 to 14. Verse 41. Esau was very angry. But he did not want to kill Jacob while Isaac was still alive. So, Esau waited. In fact, Isaac would live for many more years. And when Isaac died, Esau had become friendly with Jacob again. Verses 42 to 43. Rebekah knew Esau's plan. So, she decided to send Jacob away to her relatives in Haran. He would be safe there. Verse 44. Rebekah said that Jacob would need to be away for only a very short time. But he was actually away for 20 years. Verse 45. Rebekah said that she did not want to lose both her sons at the same time. It is not clear what she meant by that. Esau was not a good son, but he was a son anyway. But Rebekah thought that she would lose him too. We can guess how this might happen. Maybe if Esau killed his brother, then God might kill Esau. Or maybe other people would kill Esau for that reason. Or maybe he would have to go away to hide. Verse 46. Again Rebekah showed how clever she was. She did not tell Isaac the real reason why Jacob should go away. Isaac would be happy if Jacob married a good woman. In this story, everyone in the family did something wrong. However, it does prove these facts to us. God gives his blessing as he wants. And he gives it by his mercy. Although we may do good things in our life, we cannot earn God's blessing in that way. And we certainly cannot earn God's blessing by our own clever schemes. Instead, we need to be humble. We should confess our evil deeds to God. We should invite God into our lives. And we should trust him. Jacob's actions in this chapter were wrong. He lied and he cheated. But his attitude was right. He wanted to receive God's blessing. God gave a blessing to Jacob by means of Isaac. But Jacob did not receive this blessing just because he cheated. Isaac did not know whom he was blessing. But God knew the truth. And God wanted to bless Jacob. The prophecy in Genesis 25:23 shows this. Genesis 28. Jacob and Esau. Isaac called Jacob to come to him. He blessed Jacob. He told him, "Do not marry a Canaanite woman. Go now to Paddan Aram. Go to the house of your mother's father, Bethuel. Find a wife for yourself from there. Choose one of the daughters of your mother's brother, Laban. I pray that God Almighty will bless you. I pray that he will give you many children, so that your descendants become a large nation of people. May God bless you and your descendants with the good things that he promised to Abraham. The land that he promised to give to Abraham will then belong to you. That is the land where you now live as a foreign person." Isaac sent Jacob away, and Jacob went to Paddan Aram. He went to stay with Laban, who was the son of Bethuel, the Aramean. Laban was the brother of Rebekah. Rebekah was the mother of Jacob and Esau. Esau heard that Isaac had blessed Jacob and then sent him away to Paddan Aram. Isaac had told Jacob to find a woman from Paddan Aram that he would marry. Isaac had said to Jacob, "Do not marry a Canaanite woman." Esau saw that Jacob had obeyed his father and mother, and that he had gone to Paddan Aram. So Esau then understood that his father, Isaac, did not like the Canaanite women. So Esau went to visit Abraham's son, Ishmael. He married Ishmael's daughter, Mahalath, the sister of Nebaioth. When Esau married Mahalath, he kept his Canaanite wives as well. Jacob's journey. Jacob left Beersheba and he went towards Haran. He came to a place where he stayed for the night, because the sun had gone down. He took a stone and he put it under his head. Then he lay down and he went to sleep. He had a dream. In the dream, he saw some steps. The steps went up from the earth into heaven. God's angels were going up and down the steps. The Lord stood at the top of the steps. He said, "I am the Lord. I am the God of your grandfather Abraham, and the God of Isaac, your father. I will give the land that you are lying on to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will be as many as the dust of the earth. They will go to the west and to the east. They will go to the north and to the south. Through you and your descendants I will bless all the families of people on the earth. I am with you. I will take care of you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I promised to do for you." This is the promise that God made to Abraham. See Genesis 12, 2-3. Jacob woke from his sleep. He thought, "The Lord is in this place and I did not know it." Jacob was afraid. He said, "How great this place is! This must be the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Early in the morning Jacob got up. He took the stone that he had put under his head. He made it stand up straight in the ground. He poured oil on top of it. The oil was probably olive oil. Pouring oil on something showed that it belonged to God. Jacob called that place Bethel. Before that, the name of the place had been Luz. Bethel means house of God. Then Jacob made a promise to God. He said, "While I am on this journey, I want God to be with me and to take care of me. I want Him to give me food to eat and clothes to wear. Then I want to return to my father's house. If God keeps me safe, then the Lord will be my God. This special stone that I have put here will be God's house. And from everything that God gives me, I will give God 1/10. Jacob had to leave home in order to escape from Esau. Isaac blessed Jacob before Jacob left. This time, Isaac knew whom he was blessing. He gave a wonderful blessing to Jacob. Isaac said that Jacob would receive Abraham's blessing. And he said that Jacob's descendants would receive the country called Canaan. Jacob really wanted to receive this blessing. Now he received it. This was wonderful. Jacob traveled alone on his journey. He had to sleep outside. He took few possessions. He even had to pray for his food and clothes. Verse 20. But something very special happened as he traveled. He had a special dream. And in the dream, God spoke to Jacob. God gave to Jacob the same promises that God had given to Abraham and Isaac. And Jacob promised that he, too, would serve God. And so, we call God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Exodus 3:6. Notes on the verses. Verse 1. Jacob needed to know that he was doing the right thing. So it was important for Isaac to bless Jacob again. He needed to know that God wanted him to do that. Jacob would have difficult experiences sometimes. And so he needed the blessing because the blessing would help him to carry on. Verse 2. Abraham had sent a servant to choose Isaac's wife. But Jacob himself went to fetch his own wife. Isaac said that Jacob should marry Jacob's cousin, someone from among Laban's daughters. Cousins often married. Verse 3. Jacob would have 12 sons. And his descendants would become a great nation. Everything that God promised to Abraham and Isaac would happen to Jacob's descendants. Verse 4. God had already given the country to Jacob and his descendants, although they did not yet own any part of it. Verses 6-9. Esau tried to please his parents by means of another marriage. But Esau still had Canaanite wives, and God had not chosen Ishmael. Esau did not understand God's plan. Verses 10-11. Jacob had God's blessing. But Jacob had no money and he had no friends. He slept outside. He used a stone as his pillow. Verse 12. This staircase was between earth and heaven. so it was similar to the tower in Babel. But there were many differences. Men built the tower and they tried to reach heaven. They thought that they were clever. And they thought that they could be equal to God. But in Jacob's dream, God provided the staircase. In John 1:51, Jesus said, "Really and truly I say to you that you will see heaven open. And you will see God's angels go up and down upon the Son of Man." Jesus is the way to heaven. Jacob needed to know that God was near him. God was not far away. Verse 13, the Lord stood above it. This may be the Lord stood above Jacob, or the Lord stood near Jacob. The word above shows that God was controlling the situation. Abraham was Jacob's grandfather. People often used the word father to mean ancestor. God showed to Jacob that God was really blessing him. Jacob really wanted God's blessing. In fact, Jacob had even used wrong methods to try to get it. But God gives his blessing where he wants to. We cannot earn it. Verse 14, God made the same promises to Jacob that God had made to Abraham and Isaac. Verse 15, Jacob would return to this country that God had given to him. God would protect Jacob as Jacob traveled. Verse 17, Jacob was not afraid that something evil would happen. That was not what he meant. He knew God's almighty power. But in Jacob's dream, he had seen God and he had heard God. God had promised great things to him. And Jacob realized how weak he was. Verse 18, later, God did not allow the Jews to put up columns. That was because the Canaanites did that to worship false gods. But Jacob put up this one here. In that way, he wanted to remind himself and other people how great God was. And Jacob wanted to remember the exact place where he had this experience. Verse 19, the place was probably not a city until later. It seems that Jacob was alone in the desert. Bethel means the house of God. Jacob gave this name to the place because he met God there. Verses 20 to 21, Jacob agreed to serve God if God helped him. Jacob's words might sound as if he was trying to bargain with God. But we do not think that this was really Jacob's intention. He knew that God was his God. He knew that God was great. He knew that God had promised to take care of him. And so he would worship God. Verse 22, at that time, Jacob had nothing to give. But he believed that God would bless him. That was why he said this. Genesis 29. Jacob and Laban. Jacob continued on his journey. He came to the land where the people from the east live. He saw a well in a field. 3 groups of sheep lay near it. Shepherds took water from the well to give to their sheep. There was a large stone that covered the top of the well. The shepherds waited until all the sheep were there together. Then they removed the stone from the top of the well. They gave their sheep water to drink, and then they put the stone back on the top of the well. Jacob asked the shepherds, "My brothers, where are you from?" The shepherds replied, "We are from Haran." Jacob said, "Do you know Laban? He is Nahor's grandson." The shepherds replied, "Yes, we know him." Jacob asked them, "Is he in good health?" They replied, "Yes, he is. Look. Here comes his daughter now, with their sheep. Her name is Rachel." Jacob said to them, "The sun is still high in the sky. It is not yet the right time to bring all the sheep together. So give them some water now. Then they can go back to the fields and eat more grass." The shepherds said, "We cannot do that. We have to wait until all the sheep are here together. Then we can remove the big stone from the well and we can give water to the sheep." When Jacob was speaking to the shepherds, Rachel arrived there. She brought her father's sheep with her. She was taking care of them. Jacob saw Rachel. She was the daughter of his uncle Laban. Jacob saw that she had Laban's sheep with her. So Jacob went to the well and he removed the big stone. Then he gave water to Laban's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel. He began to weep loudly. Jacob cried because he was happy to find his relatives. Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative of her father, Laban. He told her that he was Rebekah's son. So Rachel ran home to tell her father. When Laban heard what Rachel said, he went quickly to meet Jacob, his sister's son. He put his arms round Jacob and he kissed him. Laban brought Jacob to his home. Jacob told Laban all his news. Then Laban said, "Yes, you really are my own relative." So Jacob stayed with Laban for a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, "You should not work for me for nothing because you are my relative. Tell me what I should pay you." Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older daughter was Leah. The name of the younger daughter was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel's face and her body were beautiful. Jacob loved Rachel. He said to Laban, "I will work for you for 7 years. In return, I want to marry your younger daughter, Rachel." Laban said, "It is better for you to marry her than another man. Stay here with me." Jacob worked for 7 years to have Rachel as his wife. But the years passed very quickly because Jacob loved Rachel very much. 7 years seemed like only a few days to Jacob. Jacob marries Leah and Rachel. After 7 years, Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife. My time to work for you is finished and I want to marry her." Laban called all the people in that place to come together. He prepared a big meal for them to eat. When evening came, Laban took his daughter Leah and he gave her to Jacob. Jacob slept that night with her as his wife. Laban gave his female servant to Leah to be her servant. Her name was Zilpah. When morning came, Jacob saw that he had slept with Leah. He said to Laban, "You have done a very bad thing to me. I worked for you to get Rachel as my wife. Why have you deceived me?" Laban replied, "In our land, we do not give the younger daughter to a man first. We let the older daughter marry first. So, finish this week of Leah's marriage. Then we will give you Rachel to marry too. But you must work for another 7 years." Jacob had deceived his father Isaac. Now Laban has deceived Jacob. A marriage week was the 7 days of the feast. Jacob had to continue with Leah until that week was finished. So Jacob did what Laban said. He finished the marriage week with Leah. Then Laban gave Rachel to Jacob to be his wife. Laban gave his female servant Bilhah to Rachel to become her servant. Jacob also slept with Rachel. He loved Rachel more than he loved Leah. He worked for Laban for 7 more years. The Lord saw that Jacob did not love Leah. So he let her become pregnant. But Rachel did not give birth to any children. Leah became pregnant and she gave birth to a son. She called him Reuben. She said, "It is because the Lord has seen how sad I am. My husband will love me now because I have given birth to a son." Leah became pregnant again. She gave birth to another son. She said, "The Lord has given me another son because he knows that I am not loved." She called this son Simeon. Leah became pregnant again. Later, she gave birth to another son. She said, "Now I have given my husband 3 sons, so he will want to stay with me." She called this son Levi. Leah became pregnant again. She gave birth to another son. She said, "This time I will praise the Lord." She called this son Judah. Then she stopped giving birth to children. It was God's plan that Jacob would have a large family. God had already promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that they would have many descendants. But perhaps Jacob did not realize that God wanted him, Jacob, to have many children. It was the custom at that time for an important man to have many wives. But Jacob's father, Isaac, married only one wife. Jacob's intention was to marry Rachel. He loved her as soon as he saw her. And he tried to impress her. He moved a large stone so that he could give water to her sheep. Soon afterwards, Jacob offered to work for 7 years so that he could marry Rachel. At the end of the 7 years, Laban, Rachel's father, cheated Jacob. It was the custom that the bride would cover her face at the wedding. The morning afterwards, Jacob discovered that he had married Leah, Rachel's sister. Jacob never really loved Leah, but he did not refuse to accept her as his wife. Laban allowed Jacob to marry Rachel too, but Laban insisted that Jacob must work for another 7 years for Rachel. All this time, Jacob was learning to be humble. At home, Jacob used schemes to get whatever he wanted. But on the journey, Jacob had decided to serve God. Genesis 28:20-21. And now Jacob was learning to accept whatever God wanted to give him. In the end, God would give Jacob 12 sons, and their families would become the great nation that God had promised. Notes on the verses. Verses 1-3. Jacob arrived near the home of Nahor's family, who were Rebekah's relatives. The shepherds had brought some sheep near the well, but they were waiting for other shepherds to arrive. Then they would remove the stone that covered the well. Verse 4. Like Abraham's servant. Chapter 24, Jacob quickly found the people that he was looking for. Verse 5. Laban was actually Nahor's grandson. The Hebrew word for son can also mean descendant. This is what it means here. Verse 6. To look after the sheep seems to have been a woman's job too. So, Rachel brought Laban's sheep. Rachel was the first member of Laban's family that Jacob met. Jacob was very excited to see her. It seems that he loved her at once. Verses 7-8. Perhaps there were very many sheep that used water from the same well, so it might have been difficult to wait until the cooler evening to give water to them all. The stone that covered the well was very heavy. It was fairly difficult for one man to move it alone. It was easier when more than one man moved it. Also, it was safer to take the cover off the well less often. It was safer because then the well had a cover over it for a longer time. Verses 9-10. Jacob wanted to impress Rachel, so he moved the stone himself in order to provide water for her sheep. By this action, Jacob was showing Rachel that he would look after her. Jacob's mother, Rebekah, had used a well in that area in chapter 24. She provided water for Abraham's servant and his camels. Soon afterwards, Rebekah married Isaac. Perhaps Jacob was already hoping that he could marry Rachel. Verse 11. Jacob and Rachel were relatives, so perhaps it was the custom to kiss. But we shall soon see how much he really loved her. Verses 12-13. Laban and Rachel may have thought that Jacob would have valuable presents. Abraham's servant had brought presents when he was arranging a wife for Isaac, but Jacob had nothing. Verses 14-17. It was the custom to be friendly to all visitors, and Laban was especially pleased with Jacob, who was a relative. Laban invited Jacob to stay in Laban's home. Laban was probably hoping that Jacob would marry Leah or Rachel. Jacob was not lazy. He worked hard while he stayed with Laban. Verse 18. Jacob had no bride price to offer. In other words, he had no money to pay for his bride. 7 years of work was a lot to give for a bride. But Jacob loved Rachel and he needed a home. Probably Jacob and Rachel were engaged, but they were not living together. That is like Joseph and Mary in the New Testament. Verse 20. Jacob really loved Rachel. He was happy as he worked, so he did not feel as if he was waiting for her. Verse 21. Jacob had to go to Laban to claim his wife. Perhaps Laban did not want Jacob and Rachel to marry at once. Laban could remember how quickly Rebekah left home. Genesis 24:54-56. Both Jacob and Rachel were good workers. Laban did not want them to leave. Verse 22. Laban arranged the wedding for his daughter and Jacob, but Laban was not an honest man. It seems that Laban and his family knew about the real God. Genesis 24:31, 24:50. But perhaps they were not still serving God. They had images of false gods in their home. Genesis 31:30-35. Verse 23. Laban cheated Jacob. Laban gave his older daughter, Leah, to Jacob instead of Rachel. The bride wore a veil for the wedding, and the place was very dark. Also, Jacob had drunk wine. Verse 25. In the morning, Jacob discovered that he had married the wrong woman. He complained to Laban. Rachel was the woman whom Jacob loved. Verse 26. Among Jacob's relatives, the oldest son, the son that was born first in the family, had special rights. In fact, Jacob bought those rights from Esau. Here, Laban mentioned the idea that in his country the oldest daughter had special rights. But this excuse was not fair. Jacob believed that he was marrying Rachel, and Laban had not been honest. Verse 27. When there was a wedding, people organized a feast for it. The feast lasted for 1 week. Jacob could have left afterwards, with his 2 brides. But Laban trusted that Jacob would stay. Jacob could not trust Laban. But Laban knew that he could trust Jacob. Later, God's law did not allow a man to marry 2 sisters. Verses 28 to 30. So, Jacob had 2 wives. And each wife had a maid. Verse 31. God was carrying out his promise. God was watching Jacob and his family, so that God could look after them. Jacob never really loved Leah, but he accepted her as his wife. And God was kind to her. He helped her to have several children. Rachel was the wife whom Jacob really loved. But, like Sarah and Rebekah, it was difficult for Rachel to have children. Verse 32. Reuben meant look, a son. God was making Leah into the mother of many tribes. The tribes would belong to the nation called Israel. In that way, Leah was a part of God's plan. But she could not force Jacob to love her. Verse 33. Simeon is like a Hebrew word. The word means that someone has heard. Verse 34. Levi is like the word for love. Verse 35. Judah is like the word for praise. Leah was grateful to God for her children. Perhaps she was not still trying to persuade Jacob to love her. Perhaps now she was content that God cared about her. So she praised God. Genesis 30. Jacob's family. Rachel now knew that she could not give birth to any children for Jacob. So, she became jealous of her sister. Rachel said to Jacob, "Please give me children. If not, I will die." Jacob became angry with Rachel. He said, "Am I God? God has stopped you from giving birth to children." Rachel said, "Take my servant Bilhah and have sex with her. Then she can have children on my behalf. Through her, I can have a family." In Old Testament times, it was very important for women to have children. This is like what Sarah did with Hagar. So Rachel gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob to become his wife. Bilhah became pregnant and she gave birth to a son for Jacob. Rachel said, "God has shown that I am right. He has listened to me and he has given a son to me." Because of this, she called the boy Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah became pregnant again. She gave birth to another son for Jacob. Rachel said, "I have fought with my sister and I have won." She called this son Naphtali. Leah saw that she had stopped having children. So she gave her servant Zilpah to Jacob as a wife. Zilpah became pregnant and she gave birth to a son for Jacob. Leah said, "This is very good." She called the boy Gad. Leah's servant Zilpah gave Jacob another son. Leah said, "I am very happy. Women will call me happy." So she called this boy Asher. It was the time to get the wheat in from the fields. Reuben went out and he found some mandrake plants in a field. He took them to his mother, Leah. Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of the mandrake plants that your son gave to you." But Leah said to Rachel, "You took my husband from me. That was bad enough. Now you want to take my son's mandrakes too." Rachel said, "Okay. If you give me some of your son's mandrakes, Jacob can sleep with you tonight." Rachel thought that the mandrake plants would help her to have a child. That is why she wanted them. But only God could give her a child. In the evening, Jacob came in from the fields. Leah went out to meet him. She said, "You must sleep with me tonight. I have paid for you with my son's mandrakes." So Jacob slept with Leah that night. God listened to Leah and she became pregnant again. She gave birth to a fifth son for Jacob. Leah said, God has helped me because I gave my servant to Jacob as a wife. She called her son Issachar. Leah became pregnant again and she gave Jacob a sixth son. Leah said, God has given me this valuable gift. Now my husband will respect me because I have given him 6 sons. She called this son Zebulun. Some time passed and Leah became pregnant again. She gave birth to a daughter. She called her daughter Dinah. Then God decided to help Rachel. He listened to her and he let her become pregnant. She became pregnant and she gave birth to a son. Rachel said, I am not ashamed anymore because God has given me a son. Rachel called her son Joseph. She said, I pray that the Lord will give me another son. Jacob's sheep. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob spoke to Laban. He said, let me go away now. I want to go home to my own land. Let me take my wives and my children with me. I have worked for you so that I could have them. You must let me leave, because you know how much I have worked for you. Laban said to Jacob, if you are happy with me then please stay here. I know that the Lord has blessed me because you are here with me. I have used magic to know that. Laban also said to Jacob, tell me how much I should pay you for your work. I will pay whatever you want. Jacob replied, you know how much I have worked for you. You know that you have many more animals now, because I have taken care of them. Before I came, you had only a few sheep and goats. Now you have many more valuable things. Wherever I have worked for you, the Lord has blessed you. But now I want to work to help my own family. I must do that soon. Laban asked, what must I give to you? Jacob replied, you do not need to give me anything. But just do one thing for me. Then I will still take care of your animals. I will make sure that nothing bad happens to them. Do this, let me go among all your animals today. Let me remove any animal that has a mark on it or that has more than one color on its skin. I will also take any black lambs. That is what you will give me for my work. In the future, this will show that I am honest. You can check on my animals whenever you want to. I will only have sheep or goats that have marks on their skin, or black lambs. If I have any other animals, you may call me a robber. Laban said, I agree to this. It will be as you have said. On that same day, Laban went to his animals. He quickly removed all the goats that had marks, both male and female goats. He also removed all the black lambs. He gave these animals to his sons to take care of. He sent those animals a long way away. It would take Jacob days to reach them. While this was happening, Jacob was taking care of Laban's other animals. Laban has deceived Jacob. He has taken all the animals that should be Jacob's. He has given them to his own sons to take care of. He sends them away before Jacob knows what he has done. Jacob took branches that he had cut from trees. He took them from poplar trees, almond trees, and plane trees. He cut white lines on the branches. He stripped off the outside part of the wood to show white lines. Then he put the branches in the place where there were big bowls of water for the animals to drink. They were in front of the animals when they came to drink. The animals could see the branches when it was the right time for them to have sex together. When they had sex in front of the branches, they gave birth to babies that had skin with marks. Jacob kept these lambs separate from Laban's animals. He took the rest of Laban's female animals to join with the animals that had marks or were black. In that way he got more animals that would belong to him. He kept them separate from Laban's animals. Jacob waited until the stronger female animals were ready to have sex. Then he put the special branches in front of them, near the big bowls of water. Then these animals would see the branches when they had sex together. But if the female animals were weak, he did not put the branches in front of them when they had sex. As a result, the weak animals would belong to Laban, but Jacob would keep the strong animals. In this way, Jacob became very rich. Many sheep and goats belonged to him. He also had female servants and male servants, as well as camels and donkeys. Chapter 30 continues the account of the birth of Jacob's sons. Jacob's wives persuaded Jacob to accept their maids as concubines. So, Jacob had children by 4 different women. Rachel, whom Jacob really loved, was the last of these women have babies. Afterwards, Jacob wanted to leave Laban. God had promised Jacob that Jacob would return home. Genesis 28:15. Perhaps Jacob wanted to bring up his sons in the country that God had promised to their descendants. But Laban persuaded Jacob to wait. Laban offered to pay Jacob for his work. They agreed which animals would belong to Jacob in the future. And so, Jacob became wealthy. Notes on the verses. Verses 1 to 2. Jacob's wives could have shared the joys that their husband and children gave to them. Instead, they were jealous of each other. And as a result, there was trouble among Jacob's sons later. Rachel became sad when she could not have children. She even blamed Jacob. Verses 3 to 5. It was the custom for a man to accept his wife's maid as a concubine. Abraham did this in Genesis 16:2 to 4. We do not know whether Jacob wanted to follow this custom. But Rachel was desperate. She could not have her own children. So, she wanted Bilhah to have children that Rachel could look after, with her. Verse 6. The name Dan means God is my judge. That is, God has been fair to me. Verse 8. Naphtali probably means a fight or a struggle. It is a rare word. And so we are not sure what it means. Some people think that it means God's fight. The fight or struggle might mean these things. 1. A powerful fight or struggle. 2. A struggle in the place where God had put her, that is, a struggle with her sister as Jacob's other wife. 3. A struggle with God when she was asking him to give children to her, that is, a struggle in prayer. Verse 9 to 10. We do not know whether Jacob wanted another concubine. Jacob did not really love Leah. Laban forced Jacob to marry her. But Jacob was always fair to Leah. So, he accepted her maid too. Verse 11. Gad means good luck. Verse 13. Asher means happy. Verse 14. Mandrakes were plants. People thought that those plants could help a person to love his or her partner. They thought that the plants could help barren women. The plants would help such women to become pregnant. Rachel had never been pregnant. And she was desperate to have children. This is why she wanted the mandrakes. Verses 15 to 17. It is clear that Jacob spent very little time with Leah. Leah very much wanted Jacob's love and Rachel very much wanted children. But it was Leah who had another son after this event. Verse 18. Issachar may mean let God be merciful. Or it may mean a hired man. Verse 20. Zebulun probably means honor. Verse 21. People did not usually include daughters in lists of people's children. Later, however, Dinah was an important part of the story about this family. Dinah meant judgment. Verses 22 to 23. At last, Rachel had a son. She always wanted children. But she had to wait for a long time. Verse 24. Joseph means let the Lord add. Rachel was praying for another son. And, in the end, Rachel did have another son. But that was not a happy event. Genesis 35:16 to 19. Verses 25 to 26. Jacob had stayed with Laban for 14 years. During that time, Jacob worked in order to pay for his marriages to Leah and Rachel. The time that he agreed to work had ended. So, Jacob wanted to return home to the country that God promised to him. He probably also wanted to introduce his wives and children to his mother. Verses 27 to 28. Laban knew that God had made him Laban rich because of Jacob. And so Laban did not want Jacob to go. Laban offered wages in order to keep Jacob there. Verses 29 to 34. A shepherd's wages were sometimes 1 from every 4 animals that were born. Laban thought that the animals with marks would be fewer than that. We do not know how speckles and spots were different. The sizes of the marks were probably different. Laban and Jacob agreed which animals would belong to Jacob. The animals with marks would belong to Jacob. The animals without marks would belong to Laban. Verse 35 to 36. Laban did not really want Jacob to receive any wages. Laban led away all the animals that had marks. So, Jacob was looking after animals that had no marks. Of course, young animals would be born. Laban thought that the young animals would have no marks. He was trying to cheat Jacob. Verses 37 to 40. It seems that Jacob had a dream at this time. Genesis 31, 10 to 12. Jacob's behavior may seem strange to us, but perhaps he was acting the events that he saw in this dream. Whatever happened, God made Jacob wealthy. Jacob knew that Laban was trying to cheat, but Jacob was trusting God. Genesis 31:5-7. Verse 41 to 42. God even allowed Jacob to own the stronger animals, but Laban's animals were weaker.